Hello, it's Carrie Kenner, and welcome to the weekly vlog. I want to talk today about how we learn. So I've always been interested in teaching. When I was a kid, I would play school for hours. I loved school, and that's because I was the perfect candidate for the US-based educational system. I was white, I was female, and I was conditioned by 1960s culture to be quiet and do what I was told. So I loved school and I did really well, so much so that my first grade teacher asked me to help her grade the papers of the other kids in class and asked me to be the flower girl in her wedding. And my second grade teacher recommended that I skip the third grade, which I did. And by the time I was 14, I was figuring out on my own how I was going to get extra credits and graduate when I was 16. So I studied psychology, sociology, anthropology, biology, neuroscience, all the things so that I could understand how people worked and how they behaved the way that they did. And here's kind of what I discovered. There's different ways that we gain knowledge. And the first way is inherent or innate knowledge. And these are the things that our bodies know to do without learning anything or actually mentally, cognitively knowing anything. So it's how our heart beats and how we breathe and how we digest and how we grow babies and give birth. Things that can be influenced and impacted by outside factors like toxins, stress, diet, conditioning, cultural beliefs, personal beliefs, things like that. But they still happen without our thinking about them. And then there's also kind of what I call our spiritual gifts. These are the things that we come into the world with without any part on our physical being. These are natural talents or ways that we have of being in the world. And they're often called gifts, or Michael Meade likes to talk about them as fate or destiny, not as in that we don't have any agency over what happens to ourselves, but in terms of what we're supposed to be doing as our purpose in our given lifetime. And he often talks about it as, instead of going to the pearly gates and meeting St. Peter and to have your list of sins or good deeds inventoried, you're actually just asked one question. Did you fulfill your destiny? And if you answer no, it's not that you go to hell, it's just that's a really big burden to carry into your afterlife. Then there are preverbal learnings, and those are all the things that we actually learn how to do before we have words or reasoning. And so these are things like learning language and how to walk and learning how people interact and how they behave together and learning what we like and don't like, learning cultural norms and family expectations. It's a really deep foundational way that we learn how to be in the world. And it's a foundation for the belief systems that we kind of form our way of being on. And then there's intergenerational learning, and this is kind of a new one. So there was this study done with rats, and they emitted a specific odor in the environment of these rats. And whenever that odor was emitted, they got an electrical shock. Okay, and they did this for a long period of time so that even when they stopped shocking the animals, when that odor was emitted, they would still shudder as if they were being shocked. Okay, then those rats had baby rats. And those rats, when exposed to that odor, they would also shudder, even though they weren't being shocked. And the other rats that weren't offspring of those parent rats, they didn't do that. Even babies that were baby rats that were conceived by the sperm of the affected rats or given birth to by the females of those affected rats, they also had those same reactions. And the babies of those babies, the grandchildren rats, they also had that reaction, even though none of those last two generations were exposed to the electrical shocks, but they still acted as if they did. So I'm not sure if those Intergenerational learnings fall in the inherent or the preverbal responses. But what we know, and what scientists are starting to study, is that we are learning things preconception as well as prenatally or in the utero from the environment during gestation. Then we have the most common understanding of learning, which is formal learning, where we learn things like reading, writing, and arithmetic, the things we learn in school or from books. And that is how most of us think of learning. But then schools haven't been around forever. Humans didn't go to school for most of our existence. So how most humans have learned is through observation. They're either observing the cycles of the moon or the seasons or what other people are doing to learn how to do those things. And so children wouldn't be taught specific tasks. They would be expected to watch, try these things, and then they might be given some supervision and guidance. So kind of an almost automatic version of what we now think about as the apprenticeship model. I've been so good at observation for most of my life that I learned how to read when I was 4, simply by watching what my sister was doing when she was learning to read as a kindergartner. And I've used those skills to watch what other people do in situations and feel sometimes like a chameleon, like I can really quickly take on the behaviors, actions, the things that other people are doing to figure out how to get things done, to behave in a certain situation. It's really helped me to expand the way that I am in the world. And that's part of my story of how I became a doula, is that I watched what my midwives did for me, and I started to do that for my friends. And then I took more formal trainings and learned how to be a teacher of adults. And after 20 years of teaching, I consider myself pretty much a master teacher. 2 of the really most important things I learned about being a teacher came from Pam England, the author of Birthing from Within, who taught me how to teach with stories, and from Paulo Freire, the author of Pedagogy of the Oppressed, who taught me how to create self-determined learning for adults based on their desires and needs. Both of these methods are the exact opposite of what we normally get in formal school. Instead of filling one's brain with facts or transferring the knowledge from one brain to another, we're really entering into a relationship with the learner to find out what motivates them and what they actually need to know and want to know. So, how does one learn to be a doula? Some say it's innate. It's a born gift, and people who have it don't even realize that other people don't have it because it's just the way they are in the world. They're naturally empathetic, helpful, kind, compassionate, comfortable with hands-on and being with people in intimate and stressful situations. They just have that kind of gift for being with people and being comforting and soothing. Others learn through an observational model, similar to what I did. They watch other people do it. They've seen it. They go to a birth where a doula was present and say, ooh, I want to do that. Or they shadow another doula and learn by watching what that doula does so that they can become one too. But most people go the formal route. They take a doula training. Now, there's been an ongoing debate for decades about in-person versus online trainings. And my beliefs have evolved over the years. So originally, I was in the camp that believed that you had to go to an in-person to learn how to be a doula. And that's because you had to learn these hands-on skills, and I had to be there to check what you were doing. Over time, though, I started to realize that we need a lot more doulas, and not every doula can take the time or the money or the travel to get to an in-person training. My doula training was $800, and they either had to come to an all-day class for 7 weeks or come to a class that was 5 days in a row. And that just wasn't feasible for a whole lot of people. And let's face it, the world needs a whole lot of doulas. So I started to allow people to attend my doula training via Zoom in 2016. Then I started to take some of the curriculum and put it into online modules. And by 2018, I created an entire doula training online, and it worked really well. Then the pandemic happened, and all the doula trainers went online. And ironically, I didn't want to teach only online, so I stopped. I spent a couple of years doing a deep dive into marketing and writing and traveling around the country in my camper van. And when I came back, I realized that I'm not done, but I've also slowed down. I'm not interested in spending all day in a classroom or many hours on Zoom. So I'm taking all my doula trainings and putting them online so that they are affordable and accessible. So I think that it's really important for us to think about the ways that people learn, both for ourselves when we're embarking on learning a new thing, and also when we're just interacting with other people and we're trying to share information. How do they want to receive information? How do you best learn for yourself? There's so many styles of learning, so many methods, so many things to consider, so much neurodiversity that we have to make different types of training and sharing of information available to all people. And it's such a great time to do that now. I hope this has been informative. I hope you've learned some new things and thought a little bit more about how you learn and how you might teach others. I hope it's been helpful, and I'll see you next week.